Hello, and welcome to episode 30 of Poetry Worth Hearing, hosted by me, Kathleen McPhillamy, and with music by Alex Heen. The theme for submissions this time was rule-making and/or rule-breaking, a notion inspired by reading a long sonnet sequence by Claire Cox in the Long Poem magazine, where she describes the rules she made for herself to generate the poems. We are lucky to have Claire Cox talking about these poems and reading a short extract from the sequence. Jack Nicholls, an up-and-coming poet and playwright, gives us an interview and reads some of his poems. If Claire is a rule maker, Jack could be described as a rule breaker. He speaks very interestingly about the need to learn forms and genres before bending the rules, or in his words, doing something weird with them. I was interested in the polar possibilities of rules, both as generative and restrictive. There are several overtly political poems in this episode. It's always difficult, both for the poet and the editor, to communicate the righteous message without losing the poetry along the way. However, I've tried to maintain an overall balance without sacrificing the power and passion of some of the contributions or losing the subtlety and wit of others. So, we have poems by Helen Hall, Sean Burke, Anne Bailey, Philippa Ramsden, Derek Sellen, Claire Parker, and Trish Broomfield. Jack Nicholls' first book, a pamphlet of prose poems, Meat Songs, was published by Emma Press in 2016. Since then, he has continued to work on his poetry, which has been published widely and has been placed in 2 national poetry competitions. He is preparing a full collection whilst developing his practice in the theatre, making film, and hosting a comedy night. Jack's poems are engaging, sometimes funny, and, to use his own word again, often weird. They have an energy and precision which makes them stand out wherever they appear.
Kid who wrote poetry, I suppose. I was and wrote a lot. Poetry was always a kind of, I suppose I always thought I'd be writing bigger stories and prose and things like that. And I was kind of working on things like that more. And then I went to Lancaster Uni to do a master's in creative writing, mostly because I knew I wanted to write and just wanted the time, and didn't want to enter the world really, and assumed while I was there I'd be working on my brilliant world-changing novel, which obviously sort of what's the word, faltered is the word. But while I was there, I met people who would write poetry. One of which in particular is the poet Lenny Sanders, who's another Emma Press poet actually, who I was sort of amazed that there were people doing this and found it very exciting. And so tentatively started writing and reading more poetry, kind of more sort of engaged with contemporary poems. Really started enjoying the work of Luke Kennard around that point, and thought he was the bee's knees, and saw that it could be kind of prosy and funny and that sort of thing. And so for Meat Songs, that all kind of got prompted really out of the blue. I wrote very quickly a poem, the poem Severed Pig's Head, that comes from that collection, pamphlet, kind of impromptu by the sort of forgotten news story that David Cameron potentially had relations with a pig's head. And I was sort of, I don't know, I was on Twitter at that point, and there's a lot of getting swept up in topics and ideas, and I thought, wow, what a great thing to write about. And I sort of half wrote about it. and sent it off to the Morning Star, and they published it like that week, which is gives you a very incorrect sort of view of how quickly the poetry turnaround is. But from that, it kind of I had a friend of a friend said she'd put together she ran a theatre night in London, and she'd put together some monologues or something, and could it be performed as a monologue? And so I said, oh great, maybe I could write some more stuff and it could build into something. And then that kind of as a project that didn't happen for whatever reason, I can't really remember. But I still wanted to make these monologues. And so I thought, how really sort of ignorantly, like, how hard could it be to write a load of poems? So I wrote really quickly a lot of these prose poems, kind of concerning animals, a lot of them in the voices of animals. I'd read translations from The Natural World by Les Murray as well. And that was sort of a real big influence. And so I wrote them, and prose poetry was really a shortcut because it was easy. I didn't know how to do line breaks or write an effective line of poetry, really, I think. And also coming from fiction and stories, I was like, well, these are just sort of stories, but just squished a bit and things removed. And so that's kind of how I began doing that. And it felt almost it was a very sort of fun process, and really enjoyable. And poetry started feeling like this place that I could just do anything. It can be anything, and it started feeling really exciting. And it still feels like that. But my progress in the world of poetry, so because it's been a long time since Meat Songs came out, but I'm writing very consistently, and it's the reason the time has elapsed, the lapse of time is so great is because I've found writing poems more and more difficult to get right. I spend a long time on a poem and really, really craft like individual lines, and they're all working to these. It almost feels very like there's a secret code or something that I'm working to, and I don't know if other writers feel like this, but I'm like, it's got to be exactly right with, this word has to appear here, and it kind of has to belong to this sort of family of words, and none of which almost seems overly apparent, I think, in the actual thing, but it's very important to me that it's working along these sort of ideas that I've got while I'm making it. But they take forever. They take a really long time. So that's been the kind of journey with it that I write. I now write these kind of quite considered poems that still have a lot of sort of elements of fiction and character and voice to them, but they're not. They just they take me so long, Kathleen. They take me a really long time. When I started taking things, I suppose I say taking things seriously, but I don't mean. I think I've always taken them seriously, but I feel like I've around the time that I came third in the national poetry competition with a poem that called Mum with Sword, that was written on the one hand, it was written quite quickly. It was all written in one burst and then tinkered with a little bit. And then following that, it felt really different to everything else I'd done. And since then, I've kind of been in that mode. I wanted to be trying to sort of make things. I liked Mum with Sword a lot, and it felt like a bit of a breakthrough. And so I wanted to make sort of stuff like that. And so from then, there's been a lot of sort of new influences and things that I've taken on. Some influences that are really important for me, and it sounds silly, but it's not works of poetry, but they're these old cartoons, the Fleischer Studios cartoons, like Betty Boop and stuff like that. And I'm obsessed with the character Bimbo from these cartoons. In particular, there's a film Bimbo's Initiation that's quite good, and Swing You Sinners. And they're these short animations from the 30s. And what's interesting is it's sort of before Disney kind of was big and monopolized sort of, I guess, animation and all of that. They don't really have a hero or I mean, there's this character who's a hero, but he's barely a character. And really what happens is he's the definition almost of a passive character, and he's led almost through these worlds. And I think the fun for these old animators was showing you anything can become anything. So there's all this metamorphosis. So there's a bit where a knife's about to stab him, and then as if that's not like scary enough, the knife grows teeth like a shark and tries to bite him. And I was like, and I think that's just so. I think they're like perfect poems. Do you know what I mean? I think there's not really there's an eye kind of in Bimbo being led through him, but he's not necessarily like the questing hero. We don't have a three-act structure or anything. and we just have a world that's shaped and strange and metamorphosing and feels like a mood the whole time, like that everything in the world is changing because it feels like that. And so I kind of try and yeah, I keep that's kind of a bit of a lodestar for me. I've got these Fleischer cartoons in the back of my head quite a lot while I'm writing. So they're a really big influence. And then at the moment who I really like goodness, people like Matthew Sweeney and Russell Edson I quite like. And a big one is Geraldine Clarkson. So I was hoping I could read some Geraldine Clarkson poem that I really enjoy. I got put onto her. There was a review of one of her collections in the TLS, and there was like two lines that quoted in it, and I was just like, "Oh my goodness!" So I try and read everything she does. I think she's amazing. So I'm gonna read one of her poems called "Christmas Surgery." That's from her pamphlet "Crucifix," and I think it's very exciting. So, Christmas Surgery. The waiting room ceiling was hung with twisted paper chains and frowning angels on gold twine. I took the required number of tablets and turned towards the beige-faced nurse with the velvet hands and hunky-dory feet. Please may I leave now? I asked with my eyes. She motioned me to a lime nylon cushion on a deeply stained armchair. Her velvet lips purred like a pony's, and she pawed my shoulders not unkindly. Then heaved a hard black valise onto a pile of homes and gardens, and sorted swiftly through a range of tinkling silver spikes, curettes, and scissors, coming to something like a melon baller, which she sterilised and held to the twinkling fairy reds to check for fluff. My old grey spirit, under the influence of medication, folded its limbs beneath itself, trembling. She piped some steaming primrose liquid, which smelled of cloves and apples, into a silver bowl, and dunked a white napkin right down to the bottom, wringing it till it was a hard baton, which she used to prod my belly where the wound was. Sensation vanished to the extremities, and the soft white floss of her beard tickled my neck where she leant as she worked away. It's Christmas, she said, drawing out a green streamer of pus, festive as muck, from my omphalos. Christmas, and you so much of the world. A star in her eye flickered, and the clock ticked. No other patients had stayed. We'll have devils on horseback, she said, before we have our crackers. Hold tight. It's good, isn't it? I love a lime cushion, a stained lime cushion. I always
Yeah.
feel like these things are like so. Sometimes they feel like a real insult to your dignity. Do you know what I mean? If you're in a
Mm.
situation that's scary, like a doctor's surgery, and there's these old lime green cushions, you think, God, how dare we live in this world? But then it's also embracing it when you see it on the page. So I write plays as well, which is maybe putting it maybe making more of it than it is in that I've written one play that took me years that I'm quite happy with. So I've been working for a really long time, or have been working really long time on this a big work of theatre with a narrative and everything like that. And it's I think poetry's been a good sort of almost like a pressure valve for being able to let the play be the play and let the poems be the poems almost. I need to do I do quite a lot of different forms. I work across a lot of different forms. I also sometimes like I run a comedy night that's quite strange and surreal and do sort of live performances and things with some collaborators. And everything's all these worlds feel very radically different from each other. The comedy people don't care about the poems. The poetry people don't know about the plays. You know what I mean? It all feels, but it all feels really necessary for me to do all of those things. Otherwise, they all kind of bleed into each other a little bit. And if I don't have poems that are allowed to be poems, then I end up trying to make comedy that's not funny or a play that isn't moving forwards, sort of. And so I remember going to a sort of a theatre writing workshop a while ago with a quite well known, I suppose, playwright. And he was saying, like, he's like, and there must be poetry in my plays. I included the word ligaments, and I'm really proud of the word ligaments in this one play. And it was a play that I'd considered quite spare and not particularly poetic, which is no bad thing. but then the word ligament stuck out like a sore thumb out of the text. And I remember afterwards speaking to people, and they were all going, "Ligaments, is that it? He's only able to put ligaments in, you know?" And so I've always kind of thought, like, I want to be able to be as unprecious as possible as I can with stuff that's, say, a dramatic engine and just needs to be moving forwards and is doing things with language that are not necessarily designed to sort of sit on the text and sit on the page and be exciting there in terms of the way it moves and everything like that. It's good to be able to all of those things are sort of existing through characters and dialogue and duologue and that sounded so silly, dialogue and duologue. I meant to say dialogue and monologues and things like that. And the idea that they're people and you're perhaps pretending they're people and it's the sort of conflict between them. And there's a huge emphasis on that. And I'm no expert either, you know, I don't know. But it's sort of like having poems where I'm allowed to go off and give no explanations for who this is and why they're speaking and what they want. Perhaps they don't want anything. Perhaps they're a mode of being, or perhaps they're just a collection of things, and isn't that kind of worth attention in and of itself? Poetry gives me that, whereas, yeah, writing a scene with characters and everything, it requires something different, which is exciting and brilliant in its own right, you know. But yeah, it means there's a good amount of split. And also, I hope that writing poetry means that I think a bit differently to, or at least for me, with a poem, I'm always thinking about the way it moves, and people use terms like turns and twists or something like that, and I don't really think like that, but I do always imagine it like kind of snaking around and doubling back on itself and things, and so I think the fact that I think like that means that kind of bleeds into my other work, and hopefully means that it does things that are a bit unexpected or a bit strange, while also maybe acting as terrible hindrances. I'm not sure, but you know, maybe that's what a voice is, a series of a series of hindrances you've given yourself. Yeah, yeah, that's the big thing I really like about the poems, that and the play really, that you send it off and you don't have to be present. I think I wouldn't like to be a comedian, you know, and have to show up every time for the art to exist. I think it's good to I like sending out the little boat. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, you're right about the element of collaboration. So my work as a writer on plays has been writing in isolation by myself and sending it out, and kind of it's almost been more like a process that people might recognize from poetry groups and stuff, which is writing a scene and then bringing it to. I was part of the Royal Court writers group, and so that was kind of a lot of, you'd write a scene and then we'd try it out and see where it was going and see if it had legs and things like that. And really, I'm just now moving into, because there's some stuff coming up with, I don't know how much I can say about it, but there's some stuff coming up with, hopefully a play will be staged soon. And so just now is the moment when it starts to be a more collaborative experience. But I would find it, I think, very difficult, or not the sort of thing that I do, I suppose, to be going into a room with nothing and being like, let's together work out what this is. I think that can lead to really great things and really exciting things. And just in terms of my practice, I think a lot of my writing is me puzzling out a little idea I've had in my head. And I think I myself don't really know what they are yet until I've shaped them quite a bit. And so I'm always amazed by writers who are kind of just like, what if it's this? What if it's that? What if it's the other? And so, you know, and are able to chat about that. And I'm really unprecious with my work. I'm very good at, I think I'm all right at like you know, making cuts and responding to suggestions and hearing from readers. I love that, you know. But one thing I do struggle with is if an idea is really nascent and being like, what if we all turn it on its head? I end up in a big jumble. I don't know where to go with it. With the comedy night, like you say, yeah, you are sort of, that's really built on collaboration, and the things that are exciting for me are getting lots of people together to make something quite strange. And so that, I suppose, is my version of that, where I give up. I don't really write in a way. I'm sort of just sort of am and I'm holding it together. And that's exciting, because almost being on stage and chatting almost feels a little bit like writing in the moment, and hitting on ideas and talking to an audience and trying to piece together the threads of what meanings they're offering you, and that's kind of twisting it together. And again, right, there are people who do this all the time and they're very good at it. So I'm very much an interloper, but I get a real kick out of it. I think that's almost like a live thing. And then the fun of it is it's over. It doesn't, you don't hone it and turn it into something. And especially with my poems being it's kind of crafted enterprise, that's dead fun having it and be like, that was what we made. That's what it is. And now it's done. It's kind of Sarah Kane talks about she liked theatre because it was the most she said it was like the most existential art form or the most, you're literally just doing it and it goes into the air. So that's always something I kind of bear in mind with it as well. The idea that you're doing something that can take on a bigger meaning because you don't have the same notion of lastingness. You don't, there's not that built into it. Whereas there sometimes is, if the idea is something's been printed on a page, it feels a little bit held down. Whereas if we're all just in a room together making it happen, then that bleeds in as well. And you can mean other things better doing that, I suppose. I directed a short film a while ago that's having its premiere on March the 15th, which I don't know when this comes out, might have been all gone by by that point, but it's premiering at Manchester Film Festival. And yeah, I made a short film with some BFI funding called Nettle Day, and that was like a sort of folk horror film set in a primary school. So yeah, that was great fun. um, and yeah, and it's exciting. Now, it's a lot of collaborators and a lot of people there, and so it was sort of though. Oh, I read an interview with oh gosh, I can't remember the artist's name. He was interviewed in the New Yorker, and he's mostly a visual artist. And he directed a feature adaptation of Native Son, and he said directing a film is a bit like being put in charge of the Latvian army, and you don't speak Latvian. And I felt like that. I was like, oh yeah, you're kind of semi in charge a bit sometimes, and also everyone there is much more experienced than you. So I mean, I loved directing, and the writing process again was very different because films requiring a lot of, or at least the way this one worked was there's kind of a lot of genre conventions, like you kind of want certain things from a film that's meant to be a bit scary and a bit thrilling. And I guess for me, I'd want to move forward if I got to do more film. I'd want it to be like I'm not skilled enough yet to do exactly what I want with it. Do you know what I mean? I feel like with poetry, I've reached a certain level where I can push it in certain directions that feels quite new, and I feel like a film. I think it's a good film. Those people worked really hard on it, and I'm really proud of it. But I feel like yeah, I want to go a bit weirder. That's what I suppose I'm saying. So that would be the direction of travel, and I'd want to I'd want to try seeing if I could do that maybe. And don't speak Latvian yet. You don't want to come in with a bunch of ideas and you've either 100 years too late or you're totally totally wrong-headed. But that's part of the fun of it. I love learning these new sort of forms and working in them. It's good. It's an ambition to have a first collection out at the moment, and that's what it is currently. It's just an ambition, but that's what I'm working towards. And so, yeah, it's what I've found myself working on lots of poems that are sort of. It's hard to take an outside view of it. There's no overall conception of some poetry collections can kind of be like, oh, it's about this. It's there's a clear concept. It's not that, but there's definitely sort of a mixture of quite, I suppose, almost confessional stuff, and then that's mixed in with a lot of things in other voices, and I'm quite interested in all those kind of being a little bit scattered and jumbled. And some of it's writing about real people, and some of it's sort of just kind of voices that end up occurring to me, I suppose. And so yeah, so I'm working towards that, and I've not even sent it out anywhere or anything like that. But yeah, I'm kind of building it's essentially it's a Microsoft Excel document where I where I've listed everything and where it's been sent. But that's why, so there's a lot of poems at the moment. I felt very lucky that a lot of them have been accepted in magazines and are kind of scattering, and hopefully they're getting out there and they're being read, and that I'm kind of building up something that means people would be interested to read a collection should one appear. I'm mostly connected with poetry through magazines, I suppose, through reading. So I subscribe to a few and try and read as much new stuff as I can. And I do take an interest in terms of what's coming out and who has collections out and things like that. But So I feel like the poetry world, which I feel some people are really in, and there's a lot of events and happenings and things, and I'm sort of a bit removed from that, I think, and I'm not as on it as as I could be. What was a real treat actually was I've had a couple of poems. So I mentioned Mum with Sword that came third in the national poetry competition, and then last year I had a poem commended in the national poetry competition as well. And so when Mum with Sword won, it was the pandemic, and so it was all a Zoom event. And so this recent one was so great. I got to go down and be in a room full of people. I was suddenly like, oh, I recognise all these people from the photos on the backs of books, you know. So it was, so I got to tell Mark Waldron how much I admired him, and that was a real highlight. And see who else did I meet? Joey Connolly and Susie Dickey, and just I mean, I'd met Susie a while ago, but people who are just around. Do you know what I mean? They're not just names in books. They're people. And what's exciting as well is because obviously I've had a little bit of connection with kind of other art worlds, you know, and meeting. I've met some playwrights that I really admire, and I'm from Cornwall, so I think growing up, I felt a little bit geographically cut off from the world, that the people who are making stuff are real. They exist, you know, which might have been different if I'd grown up in like London or something, you know. These days, Cornwall's quite different, I think, and there's bit more of a connection. But yeah, so meeting playwrights and filmmakers and stuff always feels like this kind of overwhelming thing. But then meeting poets is so cool as well because you meet them, but also like it feels like we're all in the same boat a little bit. We've probably all got day jobs and lives, and we're balancing all this stuff. And there's this interest that feels, you know, unless everyone in your life is a poet or loves poetry, it sometimes might feel a bit odd. You know, you've got this weird little thing that you spend all your time thinking about, and that other people don't get necessarily, maybe. So it felt amazing to be part of a little group where everyone knows that. Whereas, you know, with a filmmaker, say, you know, you could become a filmmaker and that's your job. And it's very common to go and meet people who like film. Whereas with poets, it's sort of this, we've all got this little dream that we're all sharing, you know. Okay, so I'm going to read To Do, which was the poem that I mentioned that was commended in the National Poetry Competition. Why did you sit a wax skull on my neck that held my head my whole life, and sit my real dead head in a nice display case on top of the nice display case you laid my bones in? And why did you lay my bones like they're half getting up and dressed nice, and hang my ribs with jewels? And why is my head eyeballless over the non-stop orange candle glow that sits on the neck of the candle that's non-stop replaced in the little candle holder sat on the floor in front of me? Why is there a candle? Why lock my display cases, and why lock me behind nicely wrought iron bars? And why, over the little gate, the candle replacer and lighter locks and unlocks every day, are the nicely wrought curlicues filthy, draped and filthy, with grey and ragged beards of filthy dust? Because we love you, 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 because we are very busy. I'm going to read the poems that were recently published in PN Review. So this one's called Atlantean. Adolescent, isn't it? Turning, dying, never having been known, round and round the head's unpinging microwave. Consider instead the buses in the bus museum, kingly as whales, and the great peace of the old men who attend them. Perhaps you could love them on their happy circles, love them as skeletons even, learn how to resurrect them. The buses, I mean, of course, I mean the buses. Resurrect them as easily as you reheat old takeaway. You could slide, for instance, on your wheeled mechanic creeper to the benthic zone beneath the Leyland Atlantean. See if you couldn't get her running, wrench in hand, four-stroke calm idling in your chest, listening in the deep dark to the steps of old men on their orbits as you perform your gentle surgery. And afterwards, rising to the heavy, upright world, you might see them, hands hiding in pockets, remora sucker flat caps hang in shadow over flushed and urgent faces, asking, Do you know the part you need? Do you? And the model and the serial number and where to get it and how to fit it? And is she going to be all right, do you know? She will be, won't she? She'll run and run and run. This next one's called Don Estelle Excavated. We found the body of an old man, though at first we thought it was a child. He was small. He was in a small box. One vertebra gone. Munching our sandwiches, we fell into friendly disagreement over his hat. It was too big, his hat. It didn't fit him. A ceremonial object, then. Everyone said so, but whose? We split into two camps, clown and elder. The clown faction was wrong, had to be. No one knew of a culture where the clowns met death with their faces on. And the hat looked so dopey, the elder people were surely wrong too. If worn, it would wobble on the head, buckety, ridiculous. It would not confer respect. Although it was helmet-shaped, no one said, warrior. It would not protect you, this hat. It would make you very vulnerable. Perhaps, someone said, it is not even a hat. We looked at whatever it was, our sandwiches gone. Rain was gathering in the absence at its centre, so I picked it up gingerly and walked it to the gazebo. Someone said, perhaps it is for collecting rain. This one's called Nice People. And I want to be one of the nice people. I want to turn on the television and laugh at the comedies, answer the questions on the quizzes. I want to hear a nuthatch and think, privately, nuthatch. I think I saw them once, the nice people, through long sheets of rain. I wanted to say, filthy weather, for them to say, isn't it? Such things happen in books, other sealed-off places. The village hall I escaped into, for instance, wringing wet, where our doubles, honestly the spit of us, spritzed bleach behind the serving hatch. A party there must have been. The way they spoke was lovely. Nice people I let down. I don't wipe down the white clean pall on the pushed-together tables. I hurry out into the old light, the bird sounds the birds are making. I didn't hear anything they said, only the rumble of their voices, which, I am convinced, had I drawn closer, would not have become language, but thunder. This poem was published in Stand magazine this year, and it's called Yellow Felt Tipped In. You, cross-legged on the carpet, hands to yourself, learning amber. No, not yellow, says Miss, coloured in traffic light, in her hands, wobbling, laminated. Something else. She's not yet removed her necklace. Explained resin, tree blood, scabbing. Years. Your life chopped in 3 pieces. Now pick up one of the pieces. How years come in thousands, no, not for us. And how, thousands of years ago, a mini beast drowned. And here, look, is the drowning. She has only said amber, and you to yourself have said amber. There are new colours. There can be new colours. Here's you now, digesting a sandwich a factory assembled, forgetting the time after checking your phone for the time, forgetting Miss, her face gone, eaten away. Rummaging for her among the well-rotted compost, you find you as a daffodil in a carpet of daffodils, trumpet lifted to the sun. You, little, hanging from the end of a chain. Who knows what it means, asks Miss, the light in her hands. No one does. Slow honey rolling at all of you. Get ready, says Miss. The sun tips in. It means, get ready.
You can find more about Jack and his work, as well as more about all our poets, on poetryworthhearing.biz. Our next poet, Helen Hall, shows us very contemporary rule breakers in her two poems.
Giselle Pellicot. I have decided not to be ashamed as footage of my rape is shown in court. My lifeless, choking body shown in court. He saw me as a garbage bag, a doll, a rag doll to be used by shameless men. Not rape, they said. Her husband gave consent. He gave consent. He invited us to use her. We've done nothing wrong. Those ordinary men did nothing wrong. That brother, neighbour, Monsieur Tout le Monde. So, Monsieur Tout le Monde, let's start to talk about consent, respect, about your guilt. Trashed women, we have seized the power now. We have decided not to be ashamed. In September 2023, the BBC published a report into sexual abuse of female trainees by senior male colleagues. The BBC News app ran an article entitled "Female Surgeons Sexually Assaulted While Operating." Scar. The wound festers and will not heal. A thick scar forms, red with pain. The notes report a faultless operation by a respected surgeon, no complications. In this jungle, hunters are camouflaged in green cotton gowns. Skillful hands, healing hands, entitled hands exert their mastery here. Adrenaline and sweat pulse and bloom under blazing lights. A patient lies on the table, consent form filed, eyes taped shut. As I suture the skin, he leans over, watching me, erection hard, spreading my buttocks beneath sterile scrubs. Nobody says anything. I look at their faces, but nobody speaks.
Sean Burke's first poem is a list of borrowed rules. His second is a slightly more nuanced code of instructions.
Seven things I learned from Cormac McCarthy. Keep the bore of your weapon clean. No good deed goes unpunished. Surgery can be accomplished with the poorest of means. A horse, a hat, and a handful of beans suffice when push comes to shove. Our best intentions kindle fires that consume the ones we love. You can't escape the furies, though you are doomed to try. You survive, you ride on, then you die. The Dying House. You must negotiate the rooms of the dying house in an order which we trust will become apparent. As you accompany the guests, you may meet poets and their poetry. Hear them out, then remind them, politely if possible, that this is neither the time nor the place. Try not to be disheartened by parents with children, especially if you are a parent with a child. There may be residual traces of parties and celebrations. We apologize. This is a multi-purpose location. While every care has been taken for your comfort, you may feel ill at ease, for which we claim no responsibility.
And now, a short golden shovel poem by Anne Bailey. This is a form I didn't know, but if you go to poetryworthhearing.biz, you'll find the rules.
My poem is a golden shovel poem. based on lines from Alice Oswald's Fox. Those lines are: "It is midnight. My life is laid out beneath my children like a gold leaf." Song of the Teenager. I grow, things change until it is not tooth fairies and reindeer I most crave. It is more to do with creeping home at midnight, the desperate need to move unseen through my family's gaze into a different skin and a life unmapped, empty of all that is recommended. I hate all rules laid down, supposed to keep me out of harm's way. Such fears are beneath my contempt. I need to rely only on myself. I have power that is absolute. Children have no idea of this. A freedom that is just like flying, the wind in your hair. No gold star to mark this, not even one laurel leaf.
Next, another lesson in growing up, when Philippa Ramsden shows the reality of a picnic failing to live up to a child's rules for what a picnic should be.
Picnic by the Sea, Largs, 1967. Condensation drips down inside the windscreen of the red Mini Traveller. Raindrops stroll down the outside of the cracked open window. In the front passenger seat, Mother twists around, passes a ham sandwich to the child in the back seat. "I thought we were going for a picnic," the child whines. Tight-lipped in the driver's seat, Father drains his congealing tea from the Soul thermospeaker with its pinched plastic handle. The rain teems down outside, the air in the car stale and stifling. "This is a picnic," Mother replies. "Look, sandwiches and juice in the outdoors." She swills out the plastic cup, discards the cloudy liquid out of the momentarily opened door, fills the same cup with more filmy tea. Her turn for a drink. Where's the blanket laid on the grass, crisp linen tea towels, the sunshine and the lemonade? Where are the happy parents laughing and throwing a beach ball? Uncomfortable and fidgeting, sticking to the back seat, chilled and disappointed, the child drinks down plastic-tainted juice from the Tupperware tumbler and waits for cake. In vain. There is no cake, lemonade, games or laughter at a picnic by the Largs seaside in a Mini Traveller.
As I said earlier, the idea for this episode came from Claire Cox and the rules she made to generate a long sonnet sequence. Here she talks about that process and reads some of the poems.
So, rules in poetry. I've been using kind of made-up rules to generate observations about the world, if you like. I've been exploring notions of a poetry of witness and how we might witness the plethora of things that are going on within our own experiences and way out there in distant places that we have no control over. So how can we bring that kind of experience together in a way that poetry might show us a little bit more, shed some light on the nature of that experience? So I've been, along with other ways of doing poetry practice, I've been looking at kind of what-ifs as a way of unpacking these kind of experiences. So I'll read later a series of sonnets that were based on a research project I did with Bristol University looking at vulnerability But I think the core of what I've been trying to do is construct things from different points of view, basically seeing what a kind of mashup approach would be. I'd used it during lockdown, actually, where one of the rules was don't mention COVID, don't mention anything that is outside these walls. Focus entirely on your experience of what's happening within that lockdown situation. As a way, as an open way, there's no preconceived idea. I think the excitement for me is to go, I have no idea what's going to come out of this little experiment, but let's just see what is revealed. And in a way, trusting that process, trusting the way poetry can put things together in images, in ways on the page, which also informs the reader's view of things. Those fragments kind of invite the reader to make links or to see crashes or bridges, maybe, where you wouldn't have consciously put them, if you see what I mean. So that unexpectedness excites me as well. The other joy of doing constructed kind of poetry is that you don't have to put that pressure on yourself, which is, I am now going to sit and write the best sonnet since Shakespeare, and my muse will visit, I will be inspired, and I will write great poetry. I crumble under that kind of pressure. So the idea of bringing things together, observations, headlines, things like that, take that pressure off, and you still feel like you're being creative. You still, at the end of the day, you've made something with these sets of rules, which kind of disaggregate the process a bit. Maybe if I explain a bit more about the poems that I'm going to read, that might help flesh it out a bit. So, as I say, I was working with Bristol University on something called their Environmental Keywords project, which was very much looking at the language that's used in environmental discourses, things like net zero or transition, those kind of things that are very abstract and nobody really knows quite what they mean. So we were drilling into the understandings of those words. And one of the words we were looking at was vulnerability, which sort of spoke to me, if you like. So as a process of research, I thought that I would devise a way of writing that followed some made-up rules. So the first rule I imposed on myself was use first person only, speak from your own experience, no persona, no imaginative discourse, absolutely from your first person. The second one was to time bound. It was to free write each Friday as a kind of snapshot, just to see what would happen when you did a regular practice, wherever you might be on that Friday. The third one was to record the day under 6 different categories. So the reading I was doing, bodily sensations, the weather and the landscape out there, and thoughts and ruminations. The next one was news headlines, to get a sense of what was going on in the outside world as conveyed through the media. And then I condensed those into sonnets. Again, those are rules, very much bounded by rules of sonnets, but there's something very magical about them, I think. Those 14-line, in my case, mashups, provide a little room, a little box of magic that things can happen in. So kind of patted everything into a sonnet shape, and then stood back and see what happened, really, sort of extracted bits from each of those categories into a sonnet, see what it did, see what happened over the series. I think I wrote for about 2 or 3 months in this way. So looked at what I'd accumulated over that time. And then at that point, decided to break some rules, actually, because the sense of arc, the sense of timeliness didn't quite work. So I borrowed a old sonnet that roughly fitted those rules and put it at the beginning as a kind of like more of a manifesto statement or of what was going on. So that was rule break number 1. And rule break number 2 was, interestingly, because of the time difference, because everything was on a Friday, I was writing about going away to see my sister in Denmark. I went away for 6 days. So the resulting rule writing meant that I was thinking about going away and then I was coming back and nothing happened in between. So that felt a bit of a leap, really. So I found an old sonnet that had actually followed some of these rules and put it in that kind of gap, just to bridge it over, just to get that sense of truth in the narrative, if you like, credibility in that time frame. So yeah, rules are great for generating things. Absolutely generative. Constraint can be quite inspirational, I find. Definitely worth experimenting with. And I think for me, the underlying rule is actually to have a look at what you've written, and the big rule is be satisfied with what you have. Tweak it until you're satisfied that that's your poem, and that you're wanting to share it with the world. So that's a little bit about my process, and yeah, thankfully Long Poem magazine liked that worked and published them, so great thanks to them, and great thanks to Bristol University for enabling me to do poetry as research. And yes, the resulting sonnet series is in issue 32 of Long Poem magazine, and you'll hear some of them now. Of vulnerability. Not rain, but sleet, box hedge topped white. Friends visiting sunny Brisbane, WhatsApp snaps. A Bee Gees statue, 3 bronze, 2 tourists singing. We've forgotten this morning's sonic boom. Chinese refugees are taking the South American route to the US. The Darien Gap, a pinch of jungle towards elsewhere. There will be a cancer operation tomorrow. This time, someone we know. ICU on standby for hemorrhaging. A friend has asked to phone tonight, perhaps about her husband. The cancer he has, he can't pronounce. As if we can speak things into existence. As if we can mangle them out. 16 degrees, the PC screen says. Droplets trail the window pane. The mallow closes pink on itself. Cold enough for a fleece. I stay indoors, observe the shaking garden, the daylilies' brief mouths. What is safe? Our brass-handled chest, the smoothness of the sea-washed pebble quiet on the windowsill. 2 crows blow south, jackdaw and wood pigeon. Europe is braced for the hottest day ever as Cerberus rages. I open Kathleen, definition, page 12. Things of value that are exposed to the potential for harm. Sweat slicks my lip. I drink hot water. Pollen, photons, words. We are breached. Cells collapse or get defensive. A drone strike on Moscow causes powerful explosion 3 miles from Kremlin. It hurts to look up. Bright white clouds, surprising. The seated poodle has fractured into a pair of cottage loaves. A lobster, a dildo, a dumbbell, a doughy W lost behind next door's Leylandii. The house on stilts is a choice, an evacuation drill. The new moon is a lion, the old stilled by story time. The widow's poem is all we have. Lost the swifts, the spring bringers. We agree we've not heard a cuckoo in years. Driven from home by jackdaws, straw thieves, thatch hatchers, tested by nesting, she yielded. Elders, we have caring to spare. Unused compassion finds a way, lifts the grounded fledgling, invites it to fly.
Derek Sellen gives us another list of rules in another version of Witness.
How to conduct a war. 1. Update the rules of war, making them more user-friendly. 2. Ignore treaties, ceasefires, weapon bans, and the deaths of children. 3. Indoctrinate your recruits. Play them an anthem. Remind them what happens to deserters. 4. At home, do not forget to jail dissidents, pacifists, opposition politicians, and poets. 5. Don't go in without an invitation. The grudges of minorities are often useful. 6. Fracture the infrastructure. Bomb a hospital in a surgical attack. 7. Facilitate crucial logistic objectives by enlisting famine, disease, and disaster. 8. If it comes to nuclear war, make it clear to posterity, should there be any, that they left you no choice. 9. Do not give in to talk of war crimes. Complain about the rule breaking of the other side. 10. Civilian deaths in large enough numbers can be persuasive. A swift surrender saves lives. 11. Impose a peace deal and gain a Nobel. How to justify a war, how to provoke a war, how to win a war. Get our easy-to-follow how-to guides with a publishing history as long as tyranny.
Claire Parker's poem shows the damage caused by sticking too closely to the rules.
This poem is called Stand Up. Stand up. I froze. But be quiet. But miss, stand up. Go outside. 7 years of me, all that I was, burning, yet freezing. It wasn't fair. Not fair. Not fair at all. I only said, be quiet. But miss, you broke the rules. You know you did. I couldn't help. Quiet. Your exam is cut. Go outside. Outside was cold. The playground was cruel. I slipped on the ice-black tarmac. I had no coat. Surely she knew. The spider was killing the bird that I heard in the picture right there on the page. She didn't understand that the words spurted out. I couldn't help it. Brian sat next to me. I only whispered, "Ah, poor bird." But he heard and nodded. He understood. But I never forgave her.
And finally, To Lift the Mood, a poem from Trish Broomfield. A different perspective on rules. And is she really talking about cats?
If the cat should play Monopoly. Catopoly. The rules. 1. The cat is always the top hat. Any owner the old boot. 2. Players must throw a 6 to start, except for cats, who may meow loudly for an instant start. 3. The banker is always a cat. 4. Properties. Park Lane is already owned by an absentee landlord, who happens to be a cat. Rent applies to anyone landing here and must be paid in Dreamies. Number to be negotiated. 5. Any player may purchase Piccadilly, provided they have a close relative who is a cat. 6. Waterworks is owned by a consortium of cats, all of whom only drink from the toilet. 7. Cat's chest cards all fall in a cat's favour. 8. Cat's chance. Cats have 9 chances, unlimited access to any road, and free parking. 9. Cats may visit an owner in jail, but may walk free at any time. 10. An owner may purchase Old Kent Road and build houses. Any cat may move in rent-free. 11. Income tax does not apply to cats. 12. Owners may purchase Marylebone, but must visit Java Whiskers Cat Cafe. 13. Any fines will be paid in bites and scratches, the severity of which may be reduced on receipt of Dreamies. 14. Payment on passing go will be forwarded to the Cat's Protection Racket, overseen by battle-scarred tuxedo cats. 15. The winner. The winner is always a cat. The Cat's Protection Racket is not affiliated in any way to the charity Cats Protection.
Well, that's it for episode 30, and I have it on good feline authority that Dreamies are cat treats, nothing more sinister than that. If you want to know more about the poets, read the text of unpublished poems, and find publication details, go to poetryworthhearing.biz. I hope you've enjoyed listening to this episode.